it's Starry here today, and I am going to be making this fun Valentine's card with a bunch of little mini sets. So I'm going to use the new stud Puffin, and then I'm going to pair him with some other critters. Critters in love is what I'm going to call this, because there's a bunch of pairs. So this is a slimline card. I'm going to cut down my card base. I'm going to use the entire width of the piece of cardstock, which is 8.5, and then I'm going to cut it at 7. So when I fold it, it'll be 8.5 by 3.5. So I'm just going to score that at the 3.5 mark. And then I'll fold it and make that fold nice and crisp with my bone folder. So now I have my card base. I'm just going to set that aside. And I'm going to work on the elements for my card. So I'm going to use this outside in stitched heart. And I'm going to cut it out of both guava and raspberry cardstock. So I'm going to do 2 of each color. So I'm going to have 4 hearts across here. I also thought it would be cute to add the fancy scallop heart that layers behind it, behind 2 of the hearts. So I'm cutting it out of white cardstock, but you're going to see in my final card I actually changed that to some pink spiffy speckles paper. So I've just got all my stamps loaded up in my MISTI here, and I'm just going to stamp all these on some white cardstock. And I'm using jet black ink because I'm going to color them with my Copic markers. So I'm just getting those inked up and I'm going to stamp it down. I actually have a couple more images that I'll stamp on another scrap piece of paper. So I'm just doing simple coloring on all these images. I am going to change up the colors between the 2 characters on most of these just so they're a little different. So you can see here I'm coloring my hedgehogs first. And I've used kind of a pinky color for this one. And then I'm just going to go in with some darker browns for the back. I'm going to go in with a darker one kind of around the outside edges. And I'm just using a flicking motion for the little prickly parts of the back of the hedgehog. And then I'll go in with a lighter brown and kind of fill in the middle and blend that out. So you can see it makes kind of a little shadow around the outside, kind of highlighting the outside. And then I went back with the darker one and highlighted those internal little details in there. So here's the other one. I'm using a bit of a darker brown on this one than I did on the first one, so that these two aren't exactly the same. And then I'm going to go in with a slightly lighter brown and color in the middle. Now for the body, the bottom of this one, I'm going to use a different shade of brown. This one doesn't have quite as much pink in it. It's more of a creamy tone, but it's a little different so that these two look a little different from each other. I'm going to do the same thing with the whales. So I'm going to be using some warm grays on this one. And I'm starting with a darker one around the edges. Actually went back with an even darker, and then I'm going to blend it out with a lighter. And you can see I'm kind of leaving it white at the top. So I'll go in with an even lighter one, that W1, and blend that out so that he has shadow on the bottom. For the other one, I'm using some neutral grays. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with some dark at the bottom and then blend it out with a lighter towards the top. Now for my octopi, I thought it would be cute to make them 2 very different colors. So I'm making this one some oranges, some YRs. And I just went with a darker orange. Now these aren't like bright oranges, these are more like apricot orange. But I thought it would look nice on those pink hearts. That's kind of why I didn't want to do a pink one. So I thought orange would be a good alternative. And I felt like the shading I did wasn't quite dark enough. So this is an E, but it's kind of an orangey shade of E, an E97. So I'm just going in and adding some of those shadows back in that I did with that first marker. Now for the other one, I'm going to do some aqua colors. So this will really stand out on that pink heart that I'm going to put these on. So again, I'm just going in with a darker one, and then I'll come in with a lighter one and try to blend it out. I actually think that these two were too far apart, and I had trouble making my line go away, like it's still kind of there. So I pulled out some other, a BG23, I believe, is what I'm going to end up using. But I was having trouble with the BG11 that you see there. To me, I still saw a line, so I went in with the 23 and kind of shaded it out. Now for my puffins, I'm not going to really do a lot of shading on these guys except for the bellies. So I've just colored their feet in with orange, and then I'm going to add some orange to their beaks. And then just a little bit of yellow to their beaks as well. And then I'm going to use a dark gray for their bodies rather than a black. That way you can still see the details of the stamp and you don't lose the details of the wing in a bunch of black. So I'm not going to do any shading with this gray. I'm just going to color it solid. And only one layer so that we don't lose the stamping detail. We still see the outlines a little bit. And then finally, just to give some shading to the white parts of the puffin, I'm going to use a very pale neutral gray. And I'm just going to do it along the bottom of their bellies and along the bottom of the white around their eye. And I'll actually blend that out a little bit with the Zero blender, just so that there's not a stark line between the two. So I used my coordinating dies to cut all those pieces out, and now I have a piece of the Aqua Spiffy Speckles paper, and I've cut it down so it's going to fit on my card base, and there's going to be a slight border around it. So I made it 1/4 inch less than the measurements of the card. So it's 6 3/4 by 3 1/4. And then I'm just going to glue that down and center it up so that there's a little white mat around this piece. So now to start to assemble my hearts, you can see there I traded out the white of that scalloped heart for a pink spiffy speckles. I just felt that the white was a little too stark, and it actually didn't stand out on the white mat that I have there when it overlaps on the edges, as you can see, because this is sort of how we're going to arrange things. So now I can start to assemble everything. And I planned out ahead of time which heart I wanted each of these little animal couples to be on. So the puffins are going to be on this guava heart here. And I'm adding in their little hearts that come in that set off of the heart. I just think that adds a little interesting detail. Now I'm putting my little octopi on the darker heart, and I'm going to arrange them so they kind of look like they're holding hands, so they overlap a little bit. And then for these guys, I actually colored and die cut out the little bow that comes in that set so that I can give one of them a bow tie and one of them a bow on their head. And I squeezed out a little too much glue, so here's my little trick. I just picked some up with the other bow, and now I have the perfect amount. So that's going to tuck behind the puffins. Now I have the whales on this one, and I'm going to kind of put them a little bit further towards the bottom so that the heart where the octopus is doesn't cover up my images. You can also see that I've cut out the little whale spout. It's white, but I'm going to pull that off later because I thought it just stood out a little bit too much. It looked kind of funny to me. So I'm also adding on the hedgehogs to the other heart. This one will be on the far left. And I'm putting them up a little bit so that they don't get covered up too much by the other heart as well. So now I'm going to put my hearts on my card base, and I'm starting with the outside and working my way sort of in. So you can see there how I'm not going to cover up my whales with the octopi. And then these I'm going to put on with some thin foam squares. So these are a little thinner than normal. So this kind of pops it up just a little bit. And then I'm going to use some regular thickness foam squares on the puffin, so it'll pop it up even more. But before I do the puffins, I want to put the hedgehogs on because they're going to go flat onto the card. So I'm just going to use liquid glue on them. And then for the puffins, I'll use the regular thickness foam squares. So this way we get multiple levels of dimension, but not a lot of thickness. So we're not doubling up on foam squares. All right, so here's where I pulled off the little spout. I was very careful to pull it off. I'm going to put a new one on there, but I thought that the white stood out a little bit too much. I wanted my critters to be the focus, so I thought going with the pink spiffy speckles would work better, and I'm going to stamp these in raspberry ink instead of the blue mermaid ink that the original ones were stamped in. I also looked at putting that heart there, but it didn't cover up where I had pulled off. It didn't cover up the glue, so we're going to go back with the little water spouts, but we're going to do it in pink, so it's a little less contrast. So I'm adding these right back where I had pulled them off, and I just think that that looks so much better because my eye was really drawn to that bright white over there. Now I'm filling in under the hedgehogs with that heart. It just felt a little empty to me in the bottom of that heart. And now I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I'm using Harold's ABCs to make a custom sentiment. And I'm just going to line up the letters for each piece. So it'll be 4 different pieces. So my sentiment is going to say, sending all my love to you. And I've broken it up into 4 different portions of a sentiment so I can stamp it above and below the hearts in the layout that I have. Now what I like to do is I like to kind of test stamp before I stamp it on my card, make sure it's all lined up. And usually it is because these letters are on square bases and you just line them up easy, but it's always good to test it out before you mess up your card. So I'm starting on the far right, and I'm going to do the 2 at the top first. So there's the all my, and here is the sending. And then for love, I kind of wanted it to stand out a little more, so I used all capital letters for the word love. And here is my finished card, and I just think it is so cute. So there's another look at the card. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.